The European continent is a treasure trove of jaw-dropping landscapes, with icons of human civilization, both modern and historic. It's a continent of contrasts. Colin Devey is on an expedition from the sunny Mediterranean to the frozen landscapes of Iceland.
Wow, it's impressive here. You can almost feel the weight of the ice above your head.
He'll explore Europe's natural wonders.
Fascinating.
And find traces of ancient inhabitants. Where today life pulsates in the metropolitan areas, strange creatures once populated the land. Join Colin Devey on a journey through the natural history of a fascinating continent. The Elbe Sandstone Mountains, one of the most extraordinary landscapes in Europe. The steep rocks are an ideal sanctuary for many. Peregrine falcons are a widespread raptor. They live on every continent outside the polar regions. But they feel particularly at home here among the exposed rocks, where they nest in shallow hollows. Grey wagtails look for food in the clear brooks. They share parenting duty, and chicks wait impatiently in a hidden crevice close by. The woods around these rocks are popular with visitors. Climbers and hikers come to the region in large numbers. The rock that forms these mountains is unique, with its own set of rules. Every touch reveals the basic substance of this landscape: sand. Geologically speaking, the rocks are relatively young. As impressive as these natural monuments may seem, they are fragile and protected for good reason.
It's a curious landscape that you can only really appreciate when you get up here. It's quite easy to see how the landscape was formed, though. This used to be a huge sandstone plateau, and the stone itself, the sandstone, is really quite soft. So the River Elbe, which you can see behind me, and the wind and rain have been able to cut down into it, and they've left these pillars, sculptures almost, behind. The sandstone itself is quite old, and at that time, this was the coastline.
The history of this landscape goes back a long way, millions of years. It began underwater. The curious rock formations originated in a primeval sea that no longer exists. We're on the edge of the great Tethys Ocean. 100 million years ago, in a wide bay. Europe is a water world. Tropical temperatures have heated up the oceans, and there is no ice at the poles. Sea level is higher than at any other time in Earth's history, 300 meters above the modern level. The area of the Elbe Sandstone lies in a shallow sea. Rivers and ocean currents transport sand into this area. The murky waters are perfect for hunters. Crocodiles and sharks resemble their modern descendants. But the ancient crocodiles are much bigger. The Deinosuchus, which translates to terrible crocodile, was a massive predator. huge omnivorous turtles wander through the ocean, feeding on jellyfish and aquatic plants. Their size protects them from predators. Ammonites have inhabited the world's oceans for over 350 million years. They thrive one last time in the Tethys Sea before completely disappearing at the end of the Cretaceous period. Plesiosaurs, prehistoric marine reptiles, roam the shallow coastal waters in search of fish. They have small heads, very long necks, and stretch up to 15 meters long. Floating elegantly through the ocean using their fin-like limbs as gigantic paddles. The warm sea is generating more life than the ecosystem can process. The uneaten biomass left over from the ocean's dead sinks to the depths, where it remains undegraded. Slowly, over millions of years, this waste is transformed into an energy-rich substance, crude oil. A large part of the world's oil reserves can be traced back to the Cretaceous period. As the water level drops, the shallowest stretches of ocean disappear, revealing a new landscape. The remains of this prehistoric ocean are the building blocks for today's mountains.
Now that ocean, of course, is long since gone. But at the time, Tethys, as we call it, was a global ocean. It covered much of Europe. Here at the coastline, the river brought lots of sand from the continent's interior into the shallow sea and created an ideal condition for the formation of a huge sandstone plateau like we see behind me. Now, at the time, Tethys was already on the retreat. And the reason is Africa, heading north for a massive collision with Europe. Land started to rise, and that rise was going to culminate in the formation of the Alps. And they're still moving today.
They are the largest mountains in Central Europe. The rugged 4,000-meter peaks, including the iconic Matterhorn, stand in the Western Alps. This jagged and inaccessible mountain world is perfect for animals adapted to life in high altitudes. Here, they live undisturbed by man. Alpine chough are sociable. They can be found above the forest line, even in extreme altitudes. Golden eagles nest here, far from egg-hungry predators. Alpine ibexes are skillful climbers and move safely on steep terrain. 200 years ago, they were almost extinct. Today, their population is slowly recovering. Rock ptarmigans blend seamlessly into the snow-capped peaks. The high mountains are imposing symbols of unchanging stability, monuments of eternity. But appearances are deceptive. Even mountains change, almost imperceptibly, but steadily. In the light of the warming sun, the rock expands. And as temperatures drop at night, the stone contracts. The mountain is breathing. Over longer periods of time, the changes become larger and more obvious. When the snow thaws in summer, heat penetrates deep into the rocks, making the mountains unstable. Rock slides can happen year-round, but are much more frequent in the warm season. Larger movements are rare, but have enormous impact. In the Mattertal near Randa in Switzerland, an entire mountain slope started to slide in 1991. 33 million cubic meters of stone fell into the depths. Slowly, the landscape changes shape. The stones are gradually conveyed away by the streams. Water has enormous power. Everything is in motion. The stones wander downhill meter by meter. Where the boulders settle, they form new habitats. Just like in the Swiss Prealps, in the valley of the Kleine Emmer. Each of these stones is unique, with its own origin and history. Colin Devey is on a field trip with Swiss colleagues. The geologists are exploring boulders that were carried here a long time ago. The old stones must be broken out.
We can pretty much tell where this material comes from. This, for example, is an ophiolite. It comes from the Matterhorn region. Likewise, we can just as accurately assign the origin of the remaining cobbles to different alpine regions.
The expedition team heads to the mountains to learn more about the history of this landscape. Alpine marmots prefer sunny meadows, where they find plenty of food and space to romp about. Even up here, there are cobbles, deposited millions of years ago.
Well, it's a river pebble. There's nothing spectacular about that of itself, but it's in a pretty spectacular and unusual place. I'm 1,000 meters above sea level, halfway up a mountain in the alpine foreland, and obviously, in times gone past, there were rivers here. These rivers have brought millions of tons of pebbles and deposited them here, layer upon layer. And over time, those layers have become rock and built this whole mountain, the Rigi Massif.
There's an incredible amount of information in this gigantic heap of cobble about the Alps and their history. What can be observed in a human life is nothing compared to the long history the Alps have behind them. A continental collision. 35 million years ago, there was a strait here. But in just 3 million years, the ocean disappears. Mountain formation begins. In another 5 million years, the Alps rise to become a mountain range. Continental plates from Africa push across the European continent. The various plates penetrate each other under the surface. And so, today, the geological border between Africa and Europe lies in Europe. The process of this collision can still be traced today. To a geologist, the mountains are a history book. Colin's looking for clues from above.
What a way to do geology! My goodness, I'm having such a great time. This is fantastic.
His route leads to where the collision is most clearly visible.
We're flying towards the Matterhorn. This is, of course, the symbol of Switzerland. It's a geologist's paradise up here, to be quite honest with you. It is a beautiful mountain. This is really a beautiful mountain.
The iconic peak of the steeply rising mountain is made of African gneiss.
It's a fantastic way to do geology, especially if you're looking at large-scale features like we are here.
The journey continues from the African peak of the Matterhorn to the north. Residues of the ocean floor line this mountain ridge.
This is part of the old ocean floor. It's the volcanic part of the ocean floor, so it was underneath all the sediments that had accumulated on the ocean. And it's made of basalts.
Here, the chain of collision is perfectly lined up. Volcanic sea floor from the depths. Behind it, deposits of the Tethys Ocean. And finally, the old European continent. The meeting of continents is still reflected in these central sections of the Alps today.
When you see Monte Rosa, you see it's a different sort of stuff. It's a different type of stone. It's a big, lumpy mountain. It's not sharp like the Matterhorn, and that's because it's not made of African continent. That thing is a piece of Europe. We are now flying basically what at the present day would take you if you had to cross the Mediterranean Sea with an aircraft. We can do it here in about 3 minutes, going between the African continent and the European continent. And that's all to do with this huge big mishmash of pieces of crust in the middle of this mountain range.
And that mishmash leads to a one-of-a-kind mountain range. But the natural history of the continent still has a long way to go. 50 million years ago, the African plate is picking up speed. When parts of it collide with Europe and the Alps are lifted out of the sea, completely new areas emerge at the edge of this event. Extensive water worlds, a lake landscape in the far southeast of the continent. Today, the Danube Delta is one of the most species-rich natural sites in Europe. A floating empire between earth, water, and air on the banks of the Black Sea. Many migratory birds make a stopover in the region, and some settle to raise their young. More than 5,000 animal and plant species are said to live here, including more than 300 bird species. There are many nesting sites to discover, but Colin has found something else.
So, here we have a little stowaway. It's a pond frog that's jumped on board, and life really is in your face here. And it's amazing how much life there is. These cormorants and all of the other birds flying around here find loads to eat in the water. It's full of fish. Now, this amazing environment's been created by the Danube, here where it meets the Black Sea and makes a delta, a maze of tiny channels and lakes. And in between them, lots of marshy areas which are full of reed. Now, humans really can't get into that reed, and so the animals can hide in there and feel safe, and that's why there's so many of them. In fact, this area, right in the middle of Europe, is the largest contiguous area of reed beds on the whole planet. It's fascinating.
Cormorants live worldwide. They breed in large colonies. These excellent divers are not usually welcome and often hunted. Not so in the Danube Delta. There is enough space here for everyone. Over 5,000 square kilometers provides enough room for an enormous number of habitats. Here, the mighty Danube flows slowly, bringing nutrients that form the base of a long food chain. There are many carp-like fish, a favorite dish of pelicans. The catfish migrates to the calm waters for spawning. This is the largest pelican colony in Europe. The majority come from Africa every spring. It's also a perfect place for the kingfisher. It observes the water from its lookout on the shore. Kingfishers are dependent on calm, clear water. Many of these birds travel between worlds. They split their years between Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Danube Delta is a sheltered meeting point between the continents, where they can successfully raise their young. Colin has an unusual encounter. A golden jackal roused the birds. In the early morning, it comes very close to the shore. Golden jackals have only been seen here for a few years in the Danube Delta. Their real home lies far away on the Arabian Peninsula.
We saw the jackals for the first time this morning. And in fact, jackals have only been in this area for the last few years. They're slowly migrating into this region from the south. Now, that type of animal migration has happened time and again in Earth's history and is really important for the evolution of life on Earth. But to migrate, the animals need pathways that they can follow. Let's go back in time. This is the Tethyan Ocean, and it's slowly being squeezed shut as Africa comes towards Europe. About 20 million years ago, the first land bridges are produced, and they divide the Tethys up into sub-basins. These are the precursors of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And these land bridges are the important things, and especially their coastal regions. They allow the animals to migrate northwards and southwards to meet and mix. It's very similar to what's happening in the Danube Delta today. The Danube, of course, is a fairly recent phenomenon on our planet. And 20 million years ago, the coastline wasn't here, it was much further in the west. So if we want to find the evidence for the mixing that happened back then, we need to go upriver.
Ancient Europe also had a habitat similar to the Danube Delta. But the coastline was further to the west, at the foot of the Alps. Today, that same location is covered by a metropolis with almost 3 million people. Vienna, the pulsating city on the Danube. A popular destination for tourists from all over the world. They visit the historical monuments, vestiges of a great past, and center of a former empire. The Schönbrunn Palace, a magical place reminiscent of times long gone. 20 million years ago, in the Miocene, migrants came from Africa. An Aceraterium. Except for the missing horn, it resembles today's rhinoceros. Bear dogs, predators who emigrated from America. Meet Calicotherium, odd-looking herbivores who stand 2.5 meters tall. The impressive giants walk on their knuckles like gorillas. With its mild climate, Vienna is considered one of the most livable cities in the world. A similar climate is also appreciated by the Dinotherium, a proboscidean with downward curved tusks in the lower jaw. These prehistoric relatives of modern-day elephants use their tusks to peel off bark. Where today the woods border the outskirts of the city, 20 million years ago, swamp forests stretch to the sea. The climate is warm. Towards the sea, the landscape changes into mangroves. Along the coast, there are oyster beds and mussel colonies. Later, the area transforms into a river landscape, dotted with swamps. Flocks of birds cross the area. It's the forerunner of today's Danube Delta, a species-rich hotspot. And so Vienna is, then as now, an international meeting place. But not all of Europe is as coveted. This continent has its badlands too.
I know this looks like Africa or North America, but it isn't. It's Europe. We're in Europe's only desert in southwest Spain, a place called Tabernas. They filmed lots of the spaghetti westerns here. And the landscape is so fascinating, I'm gonna have to get out and have a look.
In fact, the desert isn't as barren and empty as it looks at first glance. Red-legged partridges are very adaptable. They cope well with aridity and the rocky desert soil. Iberian ibexes also enjoy the sparsely vegetated area. In winter, they come down from the snowy mountains to find food in the desert. In the barren terrain, the shy animals have everything well in view. A few rainy days are enough to make the desert bloom. Many plant seeds rest in the soil during drought. A little water wakes them up. The colorful splendor cannot hide how extreme the desert is. In summer, the temperatures reach up to 50 degrees Celsius. That's when it becomes a tough fight against water shortages and extreme heat for everyone. Many of these plants also live in Africa, but the European desert has some special features.
This is a typical desert, which, despite what you might think, doesn't actually mean it has to be really hot. It's December and I'm quite comfortable dressed like this. Above all else, a desert is dry. I've just walked up this river valley behind me. It's got a couple of puddles in it, nothing much else. In an environment like this, you might expect to find cacti growing. What we actually find are these plants. Now, anyone who's been to the beach knows things like this. They've got very salty juice. The people here put them on salads. Here's another salty kind of plant. It's producing little deposits of salt on its leaves. Now, both of these are the types of plants you'd expect to find at the seaside rather than the middle of a desert.
If a lot of salt is present in the soil, it will affect the local biosphere. In fact, there are places in the Tabernas with small stalactite formations. And where water evaporates, delicate salt crystals slowly grow. Over many years, an entire salt wall has formed.
Wow, and this is what I was looking for. There's groundwater seeping out this cliff face, bringing all sorts of minerals with it. And when you taste the water, it's really salty. A lot of these minerals in here are rock salt. That's telling us deep underground there must be vast deposits of salt. And that's telling us that Where today there's a desert, there used to be an ocean.
This desert landscape was once a sea floor, the coastal area of an ocean. Today, the Tabernas lies at the foot of a mountain range, the Baltic Cordillera. And only 20 kilometers further south lies the Mediterranean coast, with the famous sand beaches of Andalusia.
And this is where the desert meets the seawater. This coastline, in terms of geological process, is not at all fixed. It depends completely on how much water's in the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean itself is just a part of the Atlantic Ocean. They're connected, of course, via the Straits of Gibraltar. But it wasn't always like that. If we go back in time several million years, we see that there are two channels connecting the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. And then something happens geologically. A mountain range rises up around Gibraltar, and it cuts off both of those channels. That's the same movement, in fact, which lifted the Tabernas Desert out of the Mediterranean. There's no more water coming from the Atlantic into the Mediterranean, so it dries out, and a huge salty desert is produced. That process, 6 million years ago, influenced the whole of the Mediterranean region.
At this time, the landscape is already similar to today's, but then the water begins to gradually retreat, and it leaves its mark, a mighty layer of salt that can still be traced in the soil of the Mediterranean Sea. It's an area with vastly different landscapes, but life has a hard time in this desert. In the middle, the last remnants of seawater collect and form highly concentrated puddles of salt. A breeding ground for stromatolites, sedimentary rocks produced by salt-loving microorganisms. Very simple, old forms of life that have survived to this day. High rock formations rise from the desert floor. These large mountain ranges tower more than 3,000 meters high. We know these mountains. Today, they are the Balearics. Majorca. The island mountains provide better living conditions than the expanse of the desert. Six million years ago, the entire Mediterranean area forms a gigantic depression. In the coastal area, the continental shelf of mainland Europe rises 1,000 meters above the desert floor. The water of the great European rivers, such as the Rhone, falls many meters over long cascades and cuts canyons into the bedrock. Traces of this period can still be found in the underwater landscapes of the Mediterranean. The Rhone is still a river with a strong current. In a vast delta, it flows into the Mediterranean and creates the unique natural paradise of the Camargue. But the wild canyons of the past can only be found inland. Many of the typical caves and karst landscapes of the Mediterranean, such as the Ardèche, originated in a time when there was an extreme gradient along the coast of the sea, and water crashed into the depths with heavy impact. The sea has long since recovered from its dramatic past.
The Mediterranean didn't stay dry for very long. The Atlantic pretty quickly found a way through that mountain range, and the sea came back, flooding the salty desert. It must have been a really dramatic event. Although I have to admit, on such a beautiful day on the beach like this, I can hardly imagine.
Colin enjoys the last sun rays of the day. In the next chapter of European natural history, colder times lie ahead. The Ice Age began about 2.7 million years ago. But what do cold times mean for life on Earth? Iceland is one of the northernmost landscapes in Europe, with many echoes of the Ice Age. Here, nature's power is palpable. Both beautiful and unforgiving. The island is made up of two different continents. The active gap between the North American and European plates runs across the country. The energy from the Earth's interior makes itself felt in many places. There are comparatively few animal species. The Icelandic horses were brought in by settlers. Inland, the ground is permanently frozen. Before the first humans arrived, the Arctic fox was the only native mammal. Gigantic glaciers cover large parts of the island and shape the environment, just like in Central Europe during the Ice Ages. Vatnajökull is the largest glacier in Europe, up to 900 meters thick in some areas.
Wow, it's impressive here. You can almost feel the weight of the ice above your head. I don't know how much is up there, and I really don't want to know. This used to be snow. Several hundred years ago, it fell up on the mountains, and through its own weight, it's been compacted down into this beautifully clear ice. It's a really bizarre feeling. You can look into here meters. You feel as if you can, at least. But actually, this ice is continually on the move. It's continually being produced and continually melting. And ice ages are a bit like that, constantly coming and going. We've had several on Earth. We define an ice age as being when both poles are frozen. At some time in the past, maybe the whole Earth was completely frozen. The last ice age we had began about 2.5 million years ago. And we can see, although we call it an ice age, it's actually a really complicated thing. It's not just one mass of ice. The ice comes and goes, comes and goes. That slight cooling or warming of the Earth, which leads to the ice advancing or retreating. Now, why exactly those slight cooling or warming episodes occur, we're not quite clear. The last really cold period ended about 10,000 years ago. Since then, the ice is retreating. You can hear the running water behind me. That's a meltwater stream. So in fact, this glacier is disappearing, and probably this beautiful ice cave may not be here next year.
Everywhere ice melts, life is gaining ground. Special green algae can exist even under icy conditions, and even microscopic animals, such as the water bears, survive in extreme cold. But for most living beings, a world of ice is problematic. That's why during the Ice Age, life thrives only beyond the great glaciers. The mammoth and woolly rhinoceros are the giants of the Ice Age. They wander in search of food, nutritious herbs, for example. About 15,000 years ago, the glaciers are slowly releasing the continent. This creates unique habitats. The Ice Ages also show us how fleeting landscapes on our Earth can be. With fluctuating temperatures, living conditions change incredibly quickly from a natural history point of view. Witnesses from the past still stand on the northeast coast of England. They remind us of a land long gone.
This is glacial clay, left here 10,000 years ago as the world got warmer and the ice retreated. Now, there was no North Sea here at that time because sea level was much lower, about 100 meters. And this sort of plastered landscape caused huge peat bogs to form. There's lots of peat here, as you can see, and even trees. This is a 7,000-year-old tree stump. It's got its roots. There are branches lying around here. There are remainders of leaves. This is like looking at an ancient forest floor. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, this forest stretched from here right over to France, and you could walk to France from here 7,000 years ago. The Stone Age people who lived here found absolutely ideal conditions. There was lots of game, there were lots of fish. But this paradise was fairly quickly lost.
Doggerland, a perfect moment in the history of the Earth. The receding ice is first followed by light, then increasingly dense forests, fertile soil. It's getting warmer. Sea eagles find plenty of fish in coastal waters. The animal world is changing. Instead of wandering mammoths, there are other four-legged herbivores. They are local animals, such as deer, wild boar, or roe deer, who do not need to migrate because they find enough food on the plains all year round. But the history of the forests between England and France ends soon. The shrinking ice of the glaciers causes sea levels to rise. The soils become salted and the landscape sinks into the sea. The British island is separated from mainland Europe. Only the remains of ancient trees on the English coast bear witness to the paradise of the last ice age. Doggerland. A view from space shows how much man changes his surroundings. Europe's major metropolises shine brightly at night. Far down south, the Gulf of Naples. A dark area is particularly conspicuous in the middle of the brightly lit urban area. Mount Vesuvius. No people live on its slopes. Naples in the early morning. It's quiet in the big city, a deceptive calm. The Neapolitan people know that, not only because in a few minutes life awakens in the streets, but because there is always a hint of great danger in the air. Roman columns. These are the walls of an historical city. Pompeii. About 20,000 people are said to have lived here in the year 79 AD. Wealthy Romans who led a privileged life, supported by slaves. A functioning society until disaster struck.
Exceptional. The atmosphere in this town is bizarre. It feels as if there ought to be Romans running backwards and forwards. In fact, it's completely still. And it's been that way for 2,000 years. On the 24th of August, 79 AD, Vesuvius had a cataclysmic eruption. Now, some of the Pompeians could flee, but most of them stayed in the town, and that was their undoing. As the hot ash clouds rolled down the side of the volcano, they were buried in their beds, turned instantly to stone. And what's amazing is that they were so surprised by this volcano, because it certainly wasn't the first time that Vesuvius had erupted.
When the city was unearthed, archaeologists found more than just ruins. Forms that human bodies left in the hot ashes. Impressive freeze frames of a devastating catastrophe. About 1,000 such bodies were found, but the total number of victims was many times higher. The old volcano, with its long history, still towers above it all today. The ancient crater structures still hold the traces of past eruptions. The history of the volcano begins 400,000 years ago. The first volcanic activity manifests itself. A mountain is building up, the Monte Somma, the forerunner of Vesuvius. 20,000 years ago, it reaches its maximum altitude, 1,800 meters. Then the first explosive outbreak blows the tip off. Rest periods are followed by further outbreaks in the coming millennia. The eruption in Roman times was already the fourth great eruption in its history, and the emergence of the actual Vesuvius with its present peak. Smaller eruptions follow up until the last century. A dangerous mountain, yet people still live in the immediate vicinity of the volcano. It's a tradition. North of Vesuvius, scientists uncover the walls of an old ruin. It's a Roman bath, built 400 years after the catastrophe. It belongs to a generous country estate. And most of it is buried in the ashes of the volcano under modern apartments. It's a magnificent building from Roman times, and further ruins lie below. Following each eruption, people build new houses on the ruins, again and again. It's the mountain that attracts people and nature. It destroys many things, but it also creates something new. Only a few years after an eruption, pioneer plants begin to reclaim the soil, and others follow. Lava and ash from the volcano contain valuable minerals, fertilizer that furthers growth. An entire region benefits from this. The fruits are unique, famous for their taste, as is the wine. There are many animals and plants. Following catastrophes, a lot of things in nature have to start all over again. The locals are joined by immigrants conquering the area. And so, an interesting mixture emerges. The volcano might be a tyrant, but it is also a patron. The events of Vesuvius are dramatic, but not unique. All over the world, life is confronted with the violence of nature. Colin Devey has reached the end of his journey at the Cape of Messina, the view of the Bay of Naples is particularly beautiful. Time to say farewell.
And that, I guess, is the quintessence of our expedition. On the one side, the forces of our planet are still extremely dangerous for humankind. But on the other side, it's exactly those forces that make life on this planet possible in the first place. So studying them and understanding them is absolutely essential for all of us. And that's what my predecessor, Pliny the Younger, knew when he stood here 1900 years ago with this excellent view over the Bay of Naples and wrote down his observations of the eruption of Vesuvius, which was destroying Pompeii. Now, it was those observations that formed the basis of the study of geology. So as a geologist, it's really quite emotional to stand here with this view behind me. And I'm going to enjoy the atmosphere for a few more minutes. Now think about it. Our planet is constantly in motion, and it's always worth taking a closer look. Cheerio.